Hello everyone, my name is Rafael Vila and it's been a long time that I've been doing these tutorials, especially in English. Um, Today I'm gonna teach you how to create your class, your first class, the PHP class. Um, is Since PHP 4 and 5, PHP has been um, moving from a procedural scripting style to an object-oriented style. So class has become one of the most important parts of PHP. So that's what we're gonna do today. This little class that I have here in the screen, I'm using NetBeans IDE 7.2.1. I'm using also Ubuntu 12.10 operating system. So uh, this is really cool. Um, this class, what it does, this object, what it does is create this page. So I'm gonna create a class that just a standard hello world, uh, and is everything basic. A class is an object. The best explanation that I have for you about an object is, for example, one thing that I read in one book when I was trying to learn the class and object-oriented style of PHP. One of the books gave me a great explanation about what is an object. For example, an object is something that is a uh, reusable code. That reusable code you can use it as many time as you want in different codes that you're implementing, as many websites as you want. So it's something generic, something that you can use. For example, is the same as a regular standard physical object like the bicycle. This is the explanation this book was given. The bicycle always have wheels, always have the uh, how to drive it, pedals and chains and all that. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel every time you write a code to build a bicycle on the code. So you can have a class that had the basic structure of the bicycle, the wheels, and all the frame and all that. And then the only thing that you need to change is just the color of the bicycle. So that's something that you can do using an object, but the structure is there. The only thing that will change is just the preferences that your end user for a website will have. And right now, uh, let's get into the coding. So what I'm gonna do, I'm going back to Netflix. Oh my God, NetBeans, and let's remove all this. So we're gonna build it from scratch, and I will have all this with the tutorial. So it is gonna be cool. So I'm gonna use my PHP index. Before to test that out, what I'm gonna teach you today, I create all this we're gonna create on the index. uh, well, one thing that you need to know when you're creating a class is that normally you want to create a class that has the same name of the PHP file. For example, this PHP is called hello world.php, so we're gonna call this class hello world, exactly the same. And that's how you start a class. That's you're telling a PHP that you're creating a class. So today what I'm gonna show is just only basic things. So but with all these basics, you can start getting into more deep coding later on. Uh, First things first. First, you need to have your variables that you're gonna use through all the structure, through all the object. Uh, like if you're used to web developing a little bit, you know that for JavaScript or something like that, if you want to create a global variable, then you create a variable outside any function that you create for JavaScript. And the same thing you're gonna have on the class. Every variable that you declare at the beginning of the class, you can use in all the functions inside the the class. For example, in PHP, normally you can obtain the same thing calling the define function. You create let's say a constant that is gonna be hello. You might call it hello, and that constant will have the value of hello world. Then if you create a function, even though this is outside the function, you create a function hello world. We don't pass in any value, and then you say echo hello. So this can be used because you define a global variable, a global constant. But with classes, it's even more simpler, because it's something that you can move around with different in different websites and different codes. You can, as I say, are reusable. How do you declare a public message? For example, if you connect a class, you can use what we call a public variable. This variable would be accessible all the time. For example, let's say we put that public. We don't have anything else on that class, just that public message variable. So let's come here and let's say let me delete this. We can use that content. Let's change it to let's create content. As you see, I'm using PHP 5.4 for this test. So I'm here using the here document style variable, but we can talk about that in other tutorials. First, I need to include the class, and probably in a later tutorial I can show you how to have an automatic class caller. So we're gonna include the hello word. It's gonna be in the script. Hello word. That's where it is located, the file. As you see, it's in the folder script, and you have hello world there. So that's what I'm calling, and I'm gonna say to echo. We're gonna create the object first. So I say hello world is a new hello world. There you go. That's the object. And here I just want to show that variable that we create, and this is how you make it. That's all. Because it's public, you see that with NetBeans, and once you include it, it gives you all the options inside this function. And right now we're gonna save this. Let's go to Firefox and let's change to the index. And there you go, hello world. Why? Because we create a public function, a public variable, so it's accessible outside the box. Let's say that the class is the box. Now if I would change this to a protected variable, that's one of the methods, and I'm trying to reload that page, it goes blank because I have the errors turned off. But now if I include this ini set, we're gonna change the display error variable on the PHP ini file, display errors, and let's say on, and I save it. Then we refresh this, we should say you cannot access protected property of hello world. So as you see, the difference between protected and public is that public can be used and can be called directly on the object, for the object. So you can call that as a method and it will be accessible. So we're gonna create three public variables. F name would be for first name, public last name, and let's create also some protected static. Okay, protected static is something that you can use we have what we call constants, and we have statics. We're gonna create that hello, and I'm gonna show you what's the difference between a static variable and a standard. Let's put this as public. When you use static variables, those are variables that you cannot set outside the box. For example, if I come here and I say I create a new object, let me separate this so you can see it more clearly. I create the object here, and now I'm gonna change the message. Remember that I remove hello world from the message, so I have that accessible, and I want to say to change this to hello world here. So now if I refresh my page, we should see hello world, because I give a different value outside the box, outside the class. I have that accessible there. So if I change this to hello Rafael to my word, and I refresh the page, you see how it changes. So the public variables are accessible outside the box. It's something that you can change values, you can change anything of those values. Those are useful when you try to communicate, have interactivity, or any kind of dynamic with the class. All right, we go back to NetBeans, but now let's try to set up. See, when I try to create an object, everything to use a variable, everything that is available is here. And even though that the static says public is not available because it's something that you cannot change the value outside the box, I would be able to access it. For example, I can come here and says say content, and let's change this to say content equals HW column hello. I think it was right. So I'm supposed to see this in content because I passed that value here. So let's see. So you see hello. So that public static, you cannot change the value, but you can access it because it's public. Now, if you say that is not public, let's change that to protected static. And we keep that like that, and we try to run it again, it will fire an error. Hello is not accessible, you cannot view it. So okay, you get the public variables that you can manipulate as you like outside the box, outside the class, or you can have a protected variable where you don't have any access outside the box, and you can have a protected static that you cannot change the value or can have access to it. Alright, so let's go back. We have created two protected statics, and let's create one public static, and we call it hello world. So we can see all the options that we have creating. Now let's create a constant. When you create a constant, you cannot set that is public or protected or anything. You just create a constant, and this is more like define what we talked earlier, like define function. So we call this contact hello. No. And in the PHP word, I noticed that most of the contacts are preferred to set up like all capitalized letters, and can't tell you why, but that's the preference, and that's called good coding methods and practices. So I'm gonna show you like that. So we have the constant. Now, what's the difference between using static variables and constant? Well, as you see, I can protect the static variables, but I cannot protect the constant. The constant will always be public. For example, if I come here and I change this to hello world, and I go back to Firefox, I got access to that constant. So I can use the constant, but that definitely cannot be changed, not even inside the class. That's something that is constantly the same, and it's the same thing with functions inside. So I cannot come. Let's before we go to the, I cannot set this to protect. You see, it just marked that is an error because this cannot be done. So that's something that you cannot protect. So if you want to have a variable that you cannot change outside the box, then you can create a static or a constant. But if you don't want any access to it from outside the box, for example, if you want to set up a password or something like that, that is not a good practice either, but it's available and it has its uses. So I leave that to your judgment. Let's start creating our new function. There's a main function that, for example, Let me see if this gives me an error. Self hello dot self. All right. As you see, I cannot set this to this value here. Why? I don't know. I cannot give you a logic explanation for that, but for example, I cannot use statics, or I cannot use more than one constant and set that value to this outside a function. So if you want to do that and you want the the specific variables have a value when you start the class, we have a function that is called construct, and as you see, I have to underscore at the beginning of the function. That's something that's a predefined a predefined name. So, and this has always be set as public. If you set up a private, it will give you an error. So this public, or you just leave it in blank. If you leave it in blank, it's just saying that it's public. So now if I want to set up this to from the beginning use those static values, then I have to declare it here. So I said this or self hello world, say this hello dot space this word. All right, so now I refresh that, I come back, I save that, I come back here, and I says this is gonna be hello world. So I'm gonna use a static variable, and notice that the difference is calling those functions, those variables. For example, that says what variable we have set. All right, so let's change a value of one of the variables. HW message equals hello world public. So we have the content. We're gonna add something to the content. It said HW message. That's how I access that variable. That is this is for a static variable. This is sorry, this is just to add a breakpoint. I'm kind of sleepy, so pardon me for so many errors. All right, so we're gonna add something else. So, and this is only for us to see how we use all those values. So I go HW, so I can call the contact hello world. So now if I refresh the page in Firefox, I have to have the three values. So I can call all those three different variables differently. So that's something that you have to keep in mind. Public variables, regular variables, are being called with this method. Statics are called like that, and constant are called like that. So that's something that you have to keep in mind when you call methods from the object. Now that we have this, you see we have created this hello world. I prefer to use self, but it's self or this is the same thing. But you notice that when I use this, it didn't give me the options to see what values do I have available for that. For example, I said, and then you see all the values that I have, the static, all the static variables and the constant. So when you creating your class and the class has like probably, yeah, and I hope so, I hope you don't do that 12,000 lines of code. You don't want to go up and down, see how you call a variable. So if you want to make it accessible in your code and your helps in the IDE that you use, it has that option to remind you of every option that you have there. So now we have this. So I'm gonna delete that. I was doing that just as an example. And I'm now for the public, I cannot use the self. I have to use the this method. And I said message equals self hello world. So even though I can do that directly in here, I'm just doing this way so you can see the logic inside the class, so you can understand how you use the variables. So these are some of the many options that you have for variables or classes and how you use it. So now I can remove this. Alright, so now I can remove this, and now let's see what it gave me. It's supposed to have the same values, I think. Yep, the only thing that changes is the constant that has the same value always. Now that we understand how variables are called and contains the methods that you have to use, some has to be with a dash and greater than symbol, double column, and the same thing is going to be when you create functions. For example, if I create a static public function, let's say change, let's call it change grid, and let's say that we're gonna pass values with a JSON type text. We call that and JSON decode the JSON variable, and resort. So what I'm gonna return from this function will be self hello dot space, and I will send an object name we'll continue this if is set, and we can do that as with the object name, but let's just put object name to be force value that has to be passed, a required value, and the last object just be an optional value. So we're gonna pass space blank. Then we continue the result. To our word. So now when I run this script, what I'm gonna do is just change the greeting. So we're gonna do self hello world equals result. Alright, we got that. So I just create a public, and I forgot to add static function. So I created a public static function, and let me see if you can see something here. Alright, we got that. We save it. Let me see. We go into the index and we create the object. And let's set the variable L name. W L name equals Mozilla. Alright. So now we got that content. We see all the values that passes. This and this are the same. So now I'm gonna set up HW. So I'm calling a static function change greet, and we're gonna pass a JSON Alright, so we save it, and then content equals HW hello world. Remember that here we change it. Do I call change grid? Make sure that I call it the same. Alright, yeah, we got it. So now if I refresh the page, yeah, you see this error? This inside static, that's what I want to create, that this here. I just want to let you know that you cannot use the this, and I don't know if I can use the self, so we can try, and no, you cannot. So everything that is in static function, you can only use static values or constant, but no public functions. No, the logic is that this is a static function that use static values. So let's save this and refresh that page. Hello Rafael to our word. This is the same variable. This is the other variable set after we run the new static function. And as you see, when you're using a static function, you have to use the same method, column, change grid, and we pass that. Then let's put last Mozilla. See, if I save that, because I'm passing the values as JSON, let's refresh that here, and you have hello Rafael Mozilla. All right, so let's go back to the index and just add that break so we don't confuse each other. Well, now we have created the construct. You have seen the different types of variables, and you have seen the public construct function, what it does, and now we see a static function. Now let's create a private function to echo this, because you don't want to type all this strange thing every time. So let's create a private function. So you see what use a private function has. Echo message, and we just put that to echo self hello world. That's the only function that's gonna have that. So if I come here and I try to run that function, go HW, we don't see it there. And you can use the change grid like that too. Interesting. All right, so you can call it in two different sections. Let me see. Now let's try to use the private function, and it's not on the list. So private function has a simple logic, is to be used by other function, not by an user. All right, so you can, for you to see that that logic, let's create a public function. New grid, and we ain't gonna pass any value in there. We're gonna pass the value the different way. We're gonna create something similar to what we create in the change grid. We're gonna create self hello, that the same thing you're gonna create, but instead of using the object from a value passed, we're gonna use the public variables that we have. Last name, and we say this old name or empty. So we just copy in the other function, to all that self of Word. And but this time I'm gonna make something different. I'm gonna self, so we're gonna pass the value to hello world. Oh, Jesus Christ. There you go. Equals result, and then I says this to use the private function. I say that, right? So add the break there. So now I have a public function called new grid, but then this time I'm gonna pass value all the way. I ain't gonna say the value here on the parentheses, but I'm gonna send it directly here. So I'm gonna change the value of f name to Rafael, that's my name, and hw l name equals Vila, that is my last name, and content hw and new grid. And so as you see, I just changed the value as I did here. I changed the value of the variables, the public variables here, f name and l name, that's first name, last name, and then I'm gonna run the public function new grid. So here I'm using Rafael Mozilla, and here I'm using Rafael Villa, that's my real name. So if I click enter here, now you have to our word, hello world. Yeah, obviously it tried to put that information at the top, but for any reason there's an error in my code, obviously, and this is it. I forgot to add those points. To add, this is just to add value to this variable. I was just renewing that, overriding the values, but now I got it. And because this being echo and not return, that's why you see it at the beginning of the lines. So now you have Rafael Villa to our word. And Rafael Mozilla. But if you want to force that, if you want to force it inside, we can say return so that should change the position of that. There you go. If I refresh that, that should do it. Well, I hope you have enjoyed this tutorial. Let me explain you one more time how this works. So we have a simple class. Every time we want to use that class, we call it, as you see, we add it, and then we call it. And now this become an object that we can use through all that. And I want to add something so you can see. If you want to reset the function, go to HW construct content HW hello world. And review that. Oops. Didn't let me use it. Well, let me see. Normally you can use it, but if they don't want to use it anymore, I'd be surprised. Yep, yeah, you can use it anymore. Let's see. Construct. So that should work. And return to hello world. So you can use that to reset an object. So as I was trying to explain, an object is something that you can reuse over and over and again, and is something that is define a function or an object, and in this case just a hello world class that you can pass different type of variables, public variables that you can change the value inside or outside the box, static variables that are values that you can only change inside the box, and constant are variables that definitely you cannot change the value. The only downsides of constants is that constant cannot be protected. The same thing with functions. You can create static function, protect the static functions, public function, private functions. It's the same thing. Whatever you put, any code that you create, any function that you create before, you can break it down into pieces. For example, if you get a function to create the header and the footer, you can create a class to set the structure, the HTML structure, so you don't have to call it over and over again. You call the function structure, and inside that you got get site header or get header and get footer, and then you can use it as you like. This is an example, a basic tutorial on how to create classes in PHP. I hope you have enjoyed it. Let any comment if something that you would like to have more details about. I also will include the text file that I have here, my example file, to make sure that I didn't mess it up and still mess up. But I will include this hello world PHP so you can have it and play with it and familiarize with it, change it, add, create another function that you can use. And that's it for now. Hope you have enjoyed. have a very blessed day, and happy coding, guys.